Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back way back into the sun-baked world of ancient Egypt. Picture this, the rhythmic hum of merchants in the market, the scent of frankincense floating through the air, the golden Nile glinting in the distance. Sand crunches under your sandals as you weave between stalls, selling papyrus scrolls, jars of honey, and strange bundles of herbs. But here's the thing. You probably wouldn't survive this for long. Not because of the heat or the crocodiles lounging nearby, but because your teeth. Oh boy. Your teeth would be in serious trouble. See, daily life here means biting into coarse bread made with flour, ground between stone slabs, tiny bits of grit mixed right in. Every bite acts like a microscopic sandpaper party against your enamel. Chewing wasn't just eating, it was a dental hazard. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Oh, and I'd love to know where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you, so drop that in the comments. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stroll deeper into the heart of this civilization. Towering statues stare down as you pass hieroglyphs, whispering stories from a time long gone. And tonight's story, it's about something surprisingly relatable. Toothpaste. Yup. Dental hygiene isn't just a modern obsession. These ancient people were scrubbing, rinsing, gargling, and depending on the day, maybe praying a little, all in the name of clean teeth. Imagine waking up inside a small mud brick house, sunlight filtering through a reed window. Your day starts early. A quick rinse with water from a clay jug, maybe a bite of dates or bread, but already you feel that familiar nagging ache. The wear on your teeth is relentless, but you're not alone. Egyptians knew teeth were a problem. Just look around. Everyone flashes smiles dotted with chips, cracks, and missing molars. Life expectancy wasn't just threatened by snakes or plagues. It was a battle against bread sand and sugarcane. And that's why oral care mattered. A lot more than people today might imagine. The bustling market sold more than just spices and fabrics. They also offered tiny packets of ground powders, early versions of what we now call toothpaste. Granted, the word minty, fresh might be generous. But hey, it's a start. Picture a stall lined with little ceramic jars. A vendor scoops a mixture of rock salt pepper, dried mint leaves, maybe even crushed iris flower. Locals believed this blend not only cleaned but also soothed inflamed gums. The scent, a mix of herbal sharpness with the sting of ground minerals. You notice another customer, a man with deep lines etched into his face, haggling over a small pouch of something that looks like gray sand. Nope, not sand. Tooth powder. And judging by the dark stains on his teeth, he probably needs it. As you wander, you overhear a conversation between two women. One complains about her husband snoring and muttering in his sleep. The other laughs and says, it's because his mouth smells like the docks. Apparently, bad breath has always been an issue. You pause at a temple. Outside, a priest offers blessings, and unexpectedly consultations for aching teeth. That's right, priests moonlighted as dental advisors. A little prayer, a little herbal remedy, maybe a ritual for good measure. Historians still argue whether these priests were actually skilled healers or just spiritual hype men for the toothless masses. Either way, they were the closest thing to dentists for miles. The further you go, the more you realize while the pyramids were rising and pharaohs were ruling every day, Egyptians were just trying to survive a daily grind, literally that wore their teeth to the bone. By now, the sun dips lower, painting the Nile in molten gold. You pass by a baker, kneading dough, grinding flour with stone slabs, with every scrape of stone on stone. Yeah, that's another sprinkle of grit headed straight for someone's teeth. And yet, people smiled. They laughed. They found ways to cope. And in the grand tradition of humanity, they invented solutions, even if those solutions were made of things like crushed salt, dried herbs, and occasionally ashes. Stick around because in the next section we're about to dig into why teeth were such a massive deal in this desert civilization. Spoiler. It wasn't just about health, it was also about beauty status and surviving long enough to enjoy your dates and honey cakes. As the warm Egyptian sun creeps higher, you start noticing something curious. People here seem unusually concerned about their teeth. Not in a vanity-driven influencer smile way, but in a survival kind of way. Why were teeth such a big deal? Well, let's start with the obvious food. You step into a bustling bakery drawn by the smell of fresh bread. Inside, a woman pounds flour using two heavy stones. It's rhythmic grind scrape. With each pass, tiny flecks of stone chip away from the grinder and mix invisibly into the flour. Now imagine chewing that bread every day for decades. Every bite acts like chewing on the world's tiniest gravel. And no, they didn't invent dental floss yet. This wasn't a minor annoyance, it was a genuine health crisis. Egyptian mummies show shocking evidence. Open their jaws and you'll see teeth worn down to the gums, cracked enamel abscesses and infections that likely caused long, painful deaths. Historians still debate whether tooth decay or tooth wear was the bigger problem. Some argue it was the sandy bread. Others point to the rising use of sugary dates and honey in wealthier diets. But it wasn't just the rich who suffered. Whether you were a farmer planting barley, a merchant selling papyrus, or a priest chanting at the temple, your teeth were under constant attack. Dental health then became more than a personal nuisance. It was a community concern. You notice a mother scolding her young son near a potter's stall. Don't bite the clay. Your teeth are already weak. You chuckle, but it's a real worry. Strangely enough, having strong teeth was also tied to how people saw beauty and status. In Egyptian art, the gods and pharaohs are always depicted with perfect white smiles. No artist ever carved a statue of Ra with a missing molar. Even the Book of the Dead, a sacred guide to the afterlife, mentions teeth. One spell literally reads, "May my teeth be whole in the land of the blessed." Yup. Clean teeth weren't just for life. They were for eternity. And the spiritual angle didn't stop there. Priests taught that clean teeth were a sign of inner purity. Rotten teeth. Well, maybe your soul had a bit of rot too. Cheery thought, right. You pass by an elderly man sitting cross-legged grinding something with a mortar and pestle. Curious, you edge closer. He's mixing dried mint leaves, ground rock salt, and is that iris root. The smell is sharp, herbal, oddly comforting. The man glances up and says with a gap-toothed grin, "Tooth powder. My grandfather's recipe." Then he chuckles. Not that it saved him. The thing is, Egyptians weren't just passive victims of tooth decay, they fought back with everything they had. And it's here you start seeing the birth of dental science. Primitive, sure, but ingenious nonetheless. Even kids weren't spared from the battle against bad teeth. You spot a boy dragging a string through his mouth. Not floss exactly, it looks like thin palm fiber. Is he cleaning or just playing hard to tell? But it's a start. You pause at another stall where a merchant sells jars of honey oil and something labeled for mouth freshness. Turns out bad breath wasn't just embarrassing, it was considered both socially rude and spiritually unlucky. One woman jokes with her friend, "Better chew some mint leaves." Or Osiris won't recognize your prayers. Light-hearted, but also kind of serious. Scholars still argue how much of Egyptian dental care was effective versus symbolic. Did the powders really clean teeth? Or were they more about ritual comfort or placebo? Regardless, the fact remains, this civilization cared deeply about oral health. And when you care about something, you invent solutions. Looking around you, notice that even simple daily items were part of the battle. Pottery water jugs for rinsing, chewed sticks used like primitive toothbrushes, and powder sold alongside perfumes in the market. The deeper you wander, the clearer it becomes. Oral hygiene wasn't a luxury. It was survival. The sky darkens a little as clouds roll in from the Nile Delta, bringing a cool breeze. You pause by the riverbank thinking, How different would your own life be if your teeth constantly hurt? And just like that, the next mystery unfolds. Who were the people responsible for creating those early dental mixtures? Spoiler: they weren't who you might expect. You continue down the sandy path, weaving between reed baskets and linen merchants until a small sign painted with hieroglyphs catches your eye. It's not a temple, not a spice shop. It's a dental clinic. Well, sort of. Welcome to the workplace of the world's first dentists. Inside a tiny mud brick room, you spot a man hunched over a patient. No reclining chairs, no soothing background music. Just a woven mat, a low stool, and an assortment of mysterious tools. Bone picks, copper probes, and stone mortars for grinding who knows what. The man mumbles an incantation as he mixes a gritty paste, then gestures for his patient to open wide. From the corner, you wince watching a thin copper tool prod at an angry red abscess near a molar. Yeah, dental visits were never fun. Some things never change. But here's what's fascinating. This isn't some back alley operation. The title SWNW, Ancient Egyptian for Physician, appears on tomb walls, dating back over 5,000 years. And some of these physicians specialized in teeth. Historians still argue whether these were true dentists or general healers, dabbling in teeth when needed. Either way, if your tooth ached, this was the place. A papyrus scroll pinned to the wall lists treatments. You scan the pictographs. For loose teeth, apply a mixture of cumin, frankincense, and onion. For tooth pain, crush malachite with beer and rinse thrice daily. Helpful questionable. At least they were trying. As you watch, the dentist adds what looks like ground ochre into the paste. He explains to his patient to seal the hole. Modern archaeologists believe this might have acted like a primitive filling, or maybe just a placebo. Suddenly, the patient jerks. The dentist clamps his shoulders and says, "Hold still." Osiris favors the brave. Then, without any anesthesia, he digs out what you hope is just debris. You shudder. But to their credit, these early dentists weren't completely clueless. They recognized cavities, gum infections, and abscesses. And they fought back with the tools and knowledge available, some practical, some mystical. Another man walks in, clutching his jaw. The dentist doesn't even look up. Another bad tooth. The man nods, groaning. "Bread again," he mutters. Always the bread. This isn't a coincidence. Remember the grinding stones from earlier? They were the silent culprits behind much of Egypt's dental misery. Despite the pain, dental work was respected, even revered. Some tombs even depict dental procedures in their artwork, showing patients seated before healers, mixing powders, or applying salves. There's even debate among scholars whether certain priests performed dental care alongside spiritual duties. Was it a medical skill, a holy rite, maybe both? Historians still argue whether the boundaries between doctor-dentist and priest were as blurry as they seem today. Interestingly, dental clinics weren't just for emergencies. Some customers came in for routine cleanings, a checkup on that stubborn molar, or maybe just some reassurance from the gods. You notice one woman entering with her young daughter. The dentist kneels to her eye level and gently presses her gums, muttering a little swelling. Needs salt and mint, a prescription Egyptian style. Then there's the elderly man who wobbles in, his teeth almost entirely gone. But he isn't here for treatment. He's delivering bundles of dried herbs. For the mouth powders, he explains. Business and medicine are closely intertwined here. Looking around you, spot shelves lined with clay jars labeled with neat hieroglyphs. Salt, iris root, pepper, mint, frankincense. A surprisingly sophisticated pharmacy for 2500 BC. A sharp tang hits your nose. You peer into one jar. Crushed rock salt mixed with dried herbs. Toothpaste Egyptian edition. A far cry from minty foam, but probably better than nothing. As the afternoon sun filters through the doorway, you realize this isn't just a clinic. It's a snapshot of a civilization refusing to accept pain as normal. For the people of Egypt, dental care wasn't an afterthought. It was survival. It was dignity. And sometimes it was divine protection. As you step back outside, the warm breeze carries the smell of baked bread and river mud. But something else catches your nose, the unmistakable sharpness of ground mint and salt wafting from that humble clinic. And now, you're ready to learn how exactly the Egyptians transformed these ingredients into the world's first toothpaste. Spoiler, it's messier and cleverer than you might think. The warm Egyptian breeze ruffles your tunic as you step into a shaded corner of the market where something fascinating is happening. A group of women sits in a circle, hands busy grinding, stirring, and chatting. In the center is a wide, flat stone slab with piles of curious ingredients: rock salt dried mint peppercorns, iris petals, and, wait, is that crushed pumice? Welcome to the birthplace of toothpaste. You crouch down to watch as one woman crushes rock salt with a bronze pestle. Another sprinkles in dried mint, and someone else drops a few dark seeds, likely pepper, for good measure. The air smells sharp herbal and oddly refreshing. She turns to you with a grin. This keeps the mouth fresh. Or so they say. You're not sure if she's joking or dead serious. You quickly learn this wasn't just a folk remedy. Egyptians developed a recipe that by the standards of 3000 BC was pretty sophisticated. Salt for scrubbing mint for freshness, iris flower for its supposed healing properties, and pepper to stimulate gums. Historians still debate whether adding pepper was brilliant or a mild form of mouth torture. A man next to you picks up a small clay jar. Inside, a fine gray powder. He dips a damp reed stick into it, rolls it between his teeth, and grins. Try it, he offers. You politely decline. Maybe later. You can't help but notice how communal this process is. Tooth powder isn't just something you buy, it's something families make together. Mothers teach daughters. Vendors swap recipes. Some claim to have a secret formula passed down through generations. Nearby, an older man mutters while stirring his mixture. Needs more iris root, he says, for the swelling. A younger apprentice wrinkles his nose, but it smells bad. The man scoffs, better bad smell than bad teeth. And it wasn't all herbs and salt. Some recipes included less pleasant additions: pulverized ox hooves, crushed burnt eggshells, even bits of charcoal. Not exactly mint chocolate chip, is it? You pause, wondering, did it actually work? Archaeologists argue both ways. Skeptics say the abrasive powders probably caused as much damage as they prevented. Supporters note that without any care at all, the situation would have been far worse. What's certain is that Egyptians were ahead of their time. The Ebers, papyrus, and ancient medical texts dating back to around 1550 BC include several dental formulas. One reads, powder of rock salt mint, dried iris, and pepper, used to make the mouth smell sweet and gums strong. There's even evidence of people adding drops of water or vinegar to turn the powder into a paste. Sound familiar? Yep. They basically invented wet toothpaste before it was cool. Another interesting tidbit: tooth powder was often sold by perfumers. Makes sense. Who else had access to all the dried herbs, flowers, and oils? Imagine popping into your local perfume shop today and leaving with a jar of mint salt tooth scrub. You glance around. A woman ties up tiny linen pouches filled with the finished mixture. A boy delivers them to a neighboring stall. Another customer negotiates, arguing over whether crushed frankincense is really necessary or just a fancy upsell. Historians still argue whether the use of these aromatic ingredients was medical, cosmetic, or spiritual. Perhaps all of the above. One elderly woman leans over and whispers, "The priests say bad breath drives away the gods." Her friend laughs. "And my husband." Practical concerns aside, there's no denying that ancient Egyptians believed clean teeth mattered not just for health, but for spiritual well-being, social standing, and personal pride. As you wander away from the grinding circle, you pass a young girl scrubbing her teeth with a chewed stick dipped in powder. She smiles, gap-toothed, but proud. And that's when it hits you. This isn't just hygiene. This is culture. This is daily life. This is the human refusal to accept discomfort without a fight. Next up, though, you're about to discover how priests, yes, the same guys who conducted sacred rituals, also doubled as part-time dental advisors. And believe me, their methods were interesting. As you step away from the bustling marketplace, the grand silhouette of a temple rises before you. Carved stone pillars, intricate hieroglyphs, and the faint scent of incense fill the air. You wouldn't expect this place of spiritual devotion to double as a dental clinic. But in ancient Egypt, priests were more than just spiritual guides. They were also part-time dentists. Strange, absolutely. Practical. Surprisingly, yes. A young acolyte waves you inside. The high priest is preparing remedies, he whispers. You follow him through a corridor lined with papyrus scrolls and jars of mysterious powders. Inside the chamber, a priest stands by a stone table. His shaved head glistens in the dim light, and his linen robes swish softly as he works. He carefully grinds ingredients, salt-dried herbs, maybe a sprinkle of myrrh, while murmuring prayers to Thoth, the god of wisdom. Clean teeth he intones reflect a clean soul. You watch as a man enters clutching his jaw. The priest examines him with a knowing nod. No dental chair, no gloves, just hands and experience. He mixes a paste, dabs it onto the man's swollen gum, and then lays a protective amulet across his neck. Half medicine, half magic. Historians still debate whether this was medical treatment wrapped in spirituality, or spirituality disguised as medicine. One thing's clear to Egyptians, the two were inseparable. The priest turns to his apprentice. Bring the water mixed with natron. You peek over his shoulder as the apprentice returns with a clay jug. Natron, essentially natural baking soda, was used for everything from mummification to mouthwash. The patient gargles and spits, grimacing. The priest taps his staff once. Pain will pass. The gods will smile upon you. You can't help but notice that even the temple walls are covered in instructions, not just for prayers, but for healing. One inscription reads, "To cure aching teeth, grind carob with honey, place upon the tooth, and speak the words of protection." Modern researchers still argue whether these remedies worked. Some swear by the antibacterial properties of honey and salt. Others roll their eyes, noting that placing a pebble under your pillow probably did little beyond providing a placebo and a stiff neck. But it wasn't just about treating pain. Priests taught preventative care, too. They encouraged daily rinsing with water infused with herbs. Some even prescribed chewing on aromatic sticks, essentially the world's first toothbrushes. Outside the temple, you spot a woman kneeling by the river, scrubbing a bundle of herbs. Her young daughter watches as she says, "Remember, rinse 3 times morning, midday, and before sleep, or the bad spirits find your mouth." Was that health advice or superstition? In ancient Egypt, the line was beautifully blurred. Nearby, an elderly man chats with a priest. "The bread. It's too harsh," he complains, rubbing his gums. The priest sighs knowingly. "Then soften it with honey and chew slowly. May Isis soothe your suffering." There's something comforting about it in a way. The idea that your community, your temple, wasn't just a place for worship, but also a sanctuary for everyday needs like aching teeth. And yet, not everything worked. Some treatments were, let's say, optimistic. One remedy suggests grinding mouse bones with frankincense for gum fortification. Whether it worked is questionable at best. Historians still debate whether this was true science or simply a mix of trial, error, and faith. But one thing's for sure, in a world filled with plagues, parasites, and sandy bread, people were willing to try anything. As you step back into the sun, the temple bells chime softly in the distance, and you can't help but think, maybe modern dentistry isn't so bad after all. And as you walk toward the next bustling street, it's time to explore the darker side of ancient dental care, when soothing paste didn't work and desperate times called for, let's say, more intense solutions. You follow the winding street away from the temple, and the sounds of merchants and laughing children begin to fade. What replaces them is different. A soft groan, a muttered curse. A man sitting on a stone bench, hands clutching his jaw like it might fall off. Welcome to the less pleasant corner of ancient Egyptian dental care, where soothing pastes and herbal rinses no longer work, and all that's left are desperate remedies for toothaches, abscesses, and jaw-numbing pain. You pause by a healer's tent. Inside, a man leans over a patient, holding what looks suspiciously like a chisel. You wince. Hold still, the healer says, tightening his grip on the patient's head. This will only hurt until it's over. No anesthesia, no Novocaine, just determination, a steady hand, and maybe a prayer to Thoth or Isis for good measure. Historians still debate whether these procedures were crude surgeries or glorified torture. Either way, they were common. When a tooth got infected, swollen, pulsing, full of pus, there was no other choice. It had to come out. And the tools, let's just say, not dentist approved, bronze needles to lance abscesses, copper hooks to pry loose teeth, flat chisels, and mallets for, well, let's not finish that sentence. A young boy walks past you clutching his cheek. His mother holds his arm whispering, "Be brave. Be like Horus." She slips the healer a token, maybe payment, maybe an offering, and the boy disappears inside the tent. Not all treatments were this aggressive. Some were more creative. You watch another patient being handed a poultice made from crushed garlic-dried barley and honey spread thick onto a piece of linen and pressed against the jaw. The healer explains, the warmth draws the poison. The gods will do the rest. Whether it worked, debatable. But the placebo effect is a powerful thing. Others chewed on bitter herbs to numb the mouth. A man nearby gnaws on a chunk of myrrh, grimacing but determined. Another woman holds a small figurine carved from limestone. To protect me, she murmurs. Superstition or faith? Probably both. And then there were the more eyebrow-raising methods. One remedy preserved in an ancient papyrus recommends crushing dead mouse bones into powder and mixing it with beer to cure gum disease. Yup. Mouse bones. Cheers. Historians still argue about how widely this was practiced. Was it symbolic magic, a misunderstood attempt at calcium supplementation, or just desperation? Regardless, it shows something remarkable, a refusal to give in to suffering. Even when tools were crude and knowledge limited, Egyptians tried. Over and over, they tried. You glance over at the healer's assistant as she sharpens a copper hook against a flat stone. Her hands are steady, practiced. This isn't a back alley job. It's a profession born from necessity. Nearby, a man mutters through gritted teeth, "Cursed bread." His wife nods. "I told you. You chew too fast." The healer chuckles without looking up. Blame the millstones, not the wife. There's a moment of shared laughter. Even here, surrounded by pain, humor survives. Somehow that feels deeply human. As you turn to leave, the healer wipes his hands, glances at you and says, "Care for a checkup?" You shake your head quickly. "Nope. Not today." But the experience leaves you thinking we often take modern dentistry for granted. In a world without drills, Novocaine, or antibiotics, even the simplest infection could mean weeks of agony or worse. And yet the Egyptians didn't give up. They invented. They experimented. They endured. Now, though, it's time to leave the tooth-pulling tent behind and take a peek into something a bit more scholarly and perhaps a bit more mystical. Because next, you're diving into the world of ancient papyrus recipes for dental care, where science, magic, and guesswork collide in fascinating ways. You wander away from the smell of copper tools and the sharp cries of toothache sufferers, and soon the sound shifts again. Quieter, more deliberate. You've arrived at the home of Egypt's greatest treasure, the papyrus scrolls. In this humble scribe's workshop, Rolls of faded papyrus are stacked on wooden shelves, some sealed with wax, others partially unrolled, revealing lines of crisp, angular hieroglyphs. The air smells of ink, reed pens, and dried herbs. These are no ordinary scrolls. They are medical papyri, ancient how-to guides for everything from broken bones to bad breath. A scribe carefully unrolls one for you. His fingers trace the symbols as he reads aloud, for the strengthening of teeth, mixed powdered frankincense, crushed salt mint leaves, and dried iris root. Rub upon the teeth daily. You smile. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? The same formula you saw mixed in the marketplace, now preserved here as official medical knowledge. The papyrus doesn't stop there. You glance further down the scroll and catch a recipe both fascinating and a little alarming. For swelling of the gums, place a dead mouse upon the sore tooth. Chant thrice the words of protection. A dead mouse. Again. Either mice were the miracle cure of the ancient world, or someone had a seriously creative imagination. Historians still argue whether such remedies were practical, symbolic, or a little bit of both. Some scholars suggest the rodent trick was pure sympathetic magic, like cures like. Others think it was a desperate stab in the dark. You move to another scroll, the famous Ebers Papyrus, one of the oldest surviving medical texts in the world. There, it is an entire section dedicated to dental diseases. One line reads, "To prevent the movement of teeth, grind carob fruit with honey. Apply as a paste. Not bad. Honey is antibacterial. Carob is rich in tannins. This might have actually worked." Another line is less reassuring. For toothworms, burned barley mixed with beer, placed in the ear opposite the aching tooth. Wait. The ear. You blink. Is that a typo? Or were they just guessing? Historians still debate whether Egyptians genuinely believed in toothworms, tiny creatures thought to live inside teeth and cause decay. This belief actually persisted in many cultures until the Middle Ages. No microscopes, no germ theory. So worms seemed as logical an explanation as any. A scribe looks up, smiling knowingly. "The gods leave signs for us," he says. "We must read them," whether he means the hieroglyphs or the tooth pain itself. Well, you're not sure. Beyond treatments, the papyri also offer preventative advice. One scroll recommends rinsing the mouth daily with water infused with natron and crushed herbs. Another suggests chewing on twigs of areca wood, a natural toothbrush still used in parts of the world today. As you explore deeper, you notice something else. Dental care wasn't just about health. It was about purity. Clean teeth symbolized moral cleanliness, bad breath. A sign that something was wrong, not just physically, but spiritually. A young boy scurries past, holding a scroll twice his size. The scribe chuckles. He's fetching the recipe for his mother's sore gums. Everyday life and medical practice blend together seamlessly here. On the far wall hangs a painted illustration. A figure with a shining white smile stands beside Thoth, the god of wisdom. Below it reads, "May my teeth be strong, my breath be sweet, my words pure before the gods." A reminder that clean teeth weren't just for comfort or appearance. They were part of one's spiritual fitness for the afterlife. You lean back, taking it all in. Somehow, despite the crude tools and odd ingredients, there's an undeniable elegance in how the Egyptians approached health. Observation, trial, and error ritual, and practicality woven together like the papyrus fibers beneath your fingertips. As the scribe rolls the scrolls closed, he glances at you and says, "Care for a recipe to take home." You grin politely but shake your head. "Maybe not the one with the dead mouse, thanks." It's time to step back into the world of scents and powders. 'Cause next, you're about to discover how the ancient Egyptians tackled something universally relatable, bad breath. And, spoiler, some of their methods were downright delightful, others less so. You step back out into the sunlit street, but now your attention isn't on toothaches or cavities. No. Now it's something even more universal, more timeless. Bad breath. And judging by the wrinkled noses of passing merchants and the knowing smirks exchanged between neighbors, this was just as much of an issue in ancient Egypt as it is today. A gentle breeze carries the mingling scents of fresh dates, sizzling meat, sweaty bodies, and something decidedly less pleasant. You wrinkle your nose. Yep, someone around here definitely skipped their morning rinse. Turns out the Egyptians were deeply concerned about how their breath smelled. Not just for comfort or courtesy, but because foul breath was thought to repel not only friends and family, but the gods themselves. You duck into a perfumer's stall. Shelves are stacked with tiny alabaster jars, woven baskets of herbs, and clay pots sealed with beeswax. A customer leans over the counter, whispering something for the mouth. The perfumer doesn't miss a beat. He grabs a small packet labeled with hieroglyphs meaning sweet breath. Inside, a blend of frankincense resin, crushed myrrh cinnamon bark, and cardamom. He scoops a pinch into his own mouth chews and then exhales toward the customer. The customer nods approvingly. You smile. Ancient chewing gum. Historians still argue whether this was purely cosmetic medicinal or perhaps both. Chewing resins like frankincense and myrrh isn't just for fragrance, they have mild antibacterial properties. The Egyptians may not have known the science, but they absolutely knew the results. Nearby, a woman prepares a mouth rinse. She boils mint leaves thyme and a pinch of natron, a natural form of baking soda, then lets it cool in a clay jug. Her young daughter watches carefully, learning. Rinse morning and night, the mother says. And before speaking to the priest, you chuckle. Priorities. Of course, not all remedies were quite so pleasant. One recipe from a lesser-known papyrus suggests gargling with warm beer mixed with crushed carob pods, supposedly to cleanse the mouth of rot. Effective maybe. Tasty hard pass. You notice a group of children chewing on thin sticks. Curious, you look closer. The ends are frayed into soft bristles. These are miswaks, chewing sticks from the arak tree still used in parts of the world today as natural toothbrushes. The sap releases antibacterial compounds while the fibers scrub the teeth. A boy grins at you, revealing a mouth surprisingly clean for someone living 3,000 years ago. Chew, 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 he chants, mimicking the stick's motion. An older man sits on a step, grinding cloves and anise seeds. For after the feast, he explains with a wink, no one likes a fishy mouth. Even the elite were concerned. Records from royal tombs show that pharaohs carried tiny silver containers of breath-freshening pellets, likely small balls of herb spices, and resin designed to be sucked discreetly during court ceremonies. Nothing ruins divine authority like dragon breath. But not every solution was elegant. Some were ambitious. One remedy suggests burning a mixture of goat fat and aromatic woods, then inhaling the smoke for sweet breath. Whether that worked, or just left everyone smelling like smoked goat, is anyone's guess. Historians still debate how much of this was ritual versus hygiene. Did people chew frankincense to truly clean their mouths? Or was it part of spiritual preparation before prayer? Likely both. For Egyptians, cleanliness was never just physical. It was a gateway to purity, both socially and spiritually. You pause to watch as a young couple flirts by the riverbank. The boy leans in, whispering something. The girl playfully wrinkles her nose and hands him a sprig of fresh mint. Some things really never change. And through it all, one truth stands clear. Whether you were a lowly baker or a mighty priest, fresh breath mattered. But there's more to the story of Egyptian dental care than just powder and perfume. Next, you're about to uncover a bizarre culprit behind much of Egypt's tooth misery, the very thing that sustained their civilization. Sand in their bread. And trust me, it's grittier than you think. You stroll toward a bustling bakery drawn by the smell of fresh bread. Flatbreads, honeyed loaves, and barley rolls are stacked high. Customers haggle over prices. Bakers laugh and wipe flour from their brows. At first glance, it feels cozy, comforting. But little do you realize this place hides the secret villain behind ancient Egypt's dental disaster. That villain, sand. Yes, sand, in the bread. You step inside and watch as a baker grinds wheat between two large limestone slabs. The top stone spins slowly, powered by hand, scraping grain against grain, but also quietly, invisibly scraping stone against stone. Tiny shards, fine grit, microscopic flecks of rock. All fall straight into the flour. A handful here, a sprinkle there. Every loaf becomes a crunchy little time bomb for someone's teeth. Historians still argue how much of the population was affected by this. Some believe it was nearly everyone. Mummy after mummy shows teeth worn flat enamel ground to nothing, roots exposed. Cavities were rare, but tooth wear universal. The baker glances at you and shrugs. It is the price of bread, he says matter-of-factly. And it wasn't just the millstones. The Egyptian environment itself conspired against clean teeth. Grit blew in from the desert. It stuck to drying grain. It lodged in date syrup. Even the river water carried silt. You kneel by a child helping his father sift flour. Tiny hands work the sieve, but no sieve is fine enough to catch powdered stone dust. His father pats his head. Good enough, he says. The gods provide. Teeth can be fixed. Can they, though? You glance at the man's grin, two front teeth gone, the others chipped and worn to nubs. Maybe fix is a generous word. Even the wealthy couldn't escape. Archaeological digs in royal tombs revealed jawbones worn smooth molars, ground flat like ceramic plates. Pharaohs may have lived like gods, but even they couldn't escape the silent war of bread versus teeth. One old woman jokes to her neighbor, bread fills the belly and empties the mouth. They both laugh, flashing toothless grins. The problem became so common that it shaped other parts of Egyptian life. You notice that soups and stews, soft foods, were a staple, especially for elders. And the growing popularity of beer wasn't just recreational. Beer was liquid bread, providing calories without all the chewing. Or the sand. Even religious texts reflect this reality. One prayer pleads, "May the gods restore my teeth as they restore the waters of the Nile." A poetic hope, if not a practical one. You spot a vendor selling small wooden pestles, and hand grinders, a modest attempt to grind grain at home with less damage. Fewer stones in the flour, she claims. Whether that's marketing or reality is anyone's guess. Some historians argue this constant dental battle drove innovations in Egyptian medicine. Tooth powders, mouth rinses, and cheeky recipes weren't just for vanity. They were a defense against the grinding diet of daily life. And yet, Egyptians never stopped baking. Bread wasn't just food, it was sacred. Offerings to the gods included loaves of all shapes and sizes. Festivals featured bread, shaped like animals' moons and stars. Even the dead were buried with bread for the afterlife. The same bread that likely wore their teeth down in this life. You watch as a baker pulls a hot loaf from the fire. It smells heavenly sweet, nutty, rich, with barley. He hands you a piece. You take a bite. And, yep, crunch. There it is. The faint, unmistakable grit of history. As you brush the crumbs and tiny rocks from your tongue, you wonder, could there be a way to enjoy the beauty of bread without sacrificing your smile? Turns out the Egyptians thought so too. Because next, you're about to discover how the world of cosmetics blended with dental care, a place where beauty, hygiene, and maybe even a little vanity all met at the tip of the toothbrush. You brush the last crumbs and tiny rocks off your hands as you step away from the bakery, but something catches your eye. A line of stalls under woven canopies, not selling bread or grain, but selling beauty products. Small clay pots, alabaster jars, bundles of dried flowers, kohl pencils, and polished copper mirrors glint in the sunlight. Women examine powders, men haggle over perfume. And right there, nestled among the lip colors and skin salves, are items for dental care. Welcome to the surprising place where cosmetics meet oral hygiene. You approach one merchant, arranging jars labeled with hieroglyphs for sweet breath, for white teeth, for strong gums. The merchant flashes a grin, well, what's left of it, and chuckles. Beauty is not just for the face. A woman next to you dips a reed stick into a tiny pot of fine white powder. She rubs it along her teeth with practiced ease. Mint natron and crushed pumice, she explains, makes them shine like moonlight. You sniff the jar. It's sharp, salty, minty, with a hint of floral sweetness. Surprisingly pleasant. Historians still debate whether Egyptians saw dental care primarily as hygiene spiritual practice or beauty ritual. But here, watching these transactions, it's clear it was all three. Chewing frankincense for fresh breath wasn't just polite, it was stylish. Scrubbing teeth with whitening powder wasn't just about health, it was status. An elegant woman lifts a silver compact. Inside are tiny pellets, pressed balls of herbs and resin. She slips one into her mouth and lets it dissolve slowly. Her companion nudges her, whispering Pharaoh's court expects sweet words. And sweeter breath. Nearby, a man grinds burnt eggshells and mixes them with vinegar. For stains, he explains. The priests say, teeth like ivory please the gods. You watch as a child chews on a twig, then spits into the dust. His mother leans over. Whiter teeth get better husbands, she says, half joking, half serious. Cosmetic manuals of the time include recipes for mouthwashes, breath pastilles, and whitening scrubs. One papyrus reads, to make the teeth as white as the stars, combine crushed pumice, natron, and sage. Rub with a clean cloth. Did it work? Well, mostly. The abrasives likely polished away surface stains, but may have also worn enamel over time. Historians still debate if Egyptians knew the balance between cosmetic shine and long-term damage, or if they simply accepted that beauty came with a price. Even royalty got in on it. Archaeological finds from queenly tombs include beautifully carved tooth-cleaning sticks, ivory cases holding mint and frankincense, and ceramic jars labeled for the breath. You pass a pair of young men arguing over whether adding dried rose petals to their tooth powder is an improvement or just a waste. The ladies prefer it, one insists. Then it stays, the other agrees. In the distance, you overhear a merchant boasting, "My mixture makes teeth brighter than the Nile at sunrise." His customer raises an eyebrow. Brighter, or just sandier. A priest walking by mutters, "The gods care more for clean souls than clean teeth." But even he glances at the jars before moving along. Hypocrisy, maybe. Or just practicality. Beyond beauty, there was a spiritual aspect too. Egyptians believed that foul breath could block prayers from reaching the gods. Clean mouths were seen as both respectful to the divine and a sign of personal discipline. You watch as another customer purchases a small amulet shaped like a smiling mouth. The merchant explains, for protection, against sickness and gossip. Somehow that feels timeless. As the sun shifts, casting long shadows across the market, you realize something. The pursuit of beauty, whether painted eyes, perfumed hair, or polished teeth, is as old as civilization itself. And next, you're about to witness how these humble powders and sticks evolved into something even more sophisticated, early versions of real toothpaste. But be warned, some ingredients might surprise you. The afternoon sun dips lower as you follow the winding street away from the beauty stalls. Somewhere between the scent of mint-crushed iris root and sizzling street food, you catch something different, an oddly sharp, almost smoky smell. You turn a corner, and there it is, a workshop unlike any other. Jars, bowls, and bundles of herbs line the shelves. A woman stands at a stone table, grinding something white and brittle into powder. She looks up and grins. Toothpaste. But the good stuff. Welcome to the next evolution in Egyptian dental care, where humble powders become early forms of paste. You watch as she mixes ground pumice from volcanic rock, natron natural baking soda, powdered burnt eggshells, and a dash of vinegar. The dry powders fizz ever so slightly when the liquid touches them. She stirs the mixture until it forms a gritty, creamy paste. She dips her finger into the mixture and rubs it along her teeth with practiced ease. Cleanse better. Stays on longer, she explains. No need to chew sticks all day. Historians still debate whether this step from powder to paste was accidental, experimental, or intentional innovation. Maybe someone spilled water into a jar of powder and realized, hey, this works better. Another man joins her, adding a pinch of charcoal for whitening. It makes the teeth brighter, he claims. You squint. Does it, though? Maybe. You peer into another jar. This one contains dried iris root crushed into fine dust. Modern scientists believe iris root has antibacterial properties, making it a surprisingly smart choice for preventing gum disease. But not every ingredient was a winner. Burnt ox hooves, check. Crushed deer antlers occasionally. Some formulas even called for ashes of burnt bread. Whether that was meant for abrasiveness or just because, well, historians still argue. You listen as two women debate whether adding honey makes the paste more effective or just messier. One insists the gods favor sweetness. The other grumbles, and the flies favor honey. Nearby, a young boy tries the mixture but makes a face. It stings, he whines, wiping his mouth. His mother laughs. Good. That means it's working. This version of toothpaste didn't just clean, it symbolized progress. A society clever enough to take a crude mix of minerals and herbs and turn it into something that foams, sticks scrubs, and leaves you feeling at least marginally fresher. You notice that wealthier households store their paste in glazed ceramic jars, while poorer folks carry small pouches of dried powder, adding water as needed. Accessibility mattered. As you look around, you can't help but realize something. This isn't just hygiene. It's technology. It's chemistry. It's problem solving with whatever the earth provides. A priest walks past inspecting the mixtures. Salt for strength, iris for health. Ashes to drive away decay, he murmurs, half recipe, half incantation. And yet, despite all this progress, the battle with dental pain never really ended. Clean teeth didn't always mean healthy teeth, not with the ever-present threat of sand-filled bread. Scholars still debate whether these mixtures did more harm than good. The abrasives polished teeth but likely eroded enamel. But compared to doing nothing, probably a step in the right direction. As you turn to leave the workshop, the woman hands you a tiny clay pot. Try it, she smiles. You peer inside. It smells sharp, earthy, minty. You hesitate. Maybe later. The sun sinks lower and your path leads onward. Because up ahead there's something even stranger waiting, a place where dental care mixes with magic myth and amulets. And trust me, it's about to get weird. As the shadows grow longer and the hum of the market begins to quiet, you find yourself drawn toward a narrow alley lined with strange stalls. Places not for bread, not for perfume, but for magic. Amulets, carved stones, bundles of herbs tied with red string, and figurines of gods stare at you from every corner. Their eyes seem to follow as you step closer. Because in ancient Egypt, dental care wasn't just about powders and pastes. It was also about protection, about magic, about superstition, and maybe a little desperation. A stooped old woman beckons you over. Her table is covered in tiny carvings of smiling mouths, crocodile teeth, and miniature ankhs. She holds up a small charm shaped like an open mouth with perfect teeth. For strong gums, she explains. Worn around the neck, keeps the evil spirits out of your mouth. You smile politely, but you can't help but wonder. Evil spirits, or bacteria. She points to a small scroll pinned behind her stall. You step closer and read the hieroglyphs. Spell to protect the teeth. O Thoth, seal my mouth from decay as you seal the sky from chaos. It's oddly poetic, and honestly, not a terrible sentiment. Historians still argue how much Egyptians genuinely believed that dental problems were caused by spirits' curses or toothworms, tiny imagined creatures that supposedly gnawed away at teeth from the inside. This belief persisted in many cultures well into the Middle Ages. One man passes by, holding a clay tablet, etched with protective symbols. "For my son," he says, to keep his teeth strong, and his words pure. A double blessing, physical and spiritual. Nearby, a priest prepares an incense mixture, frankincense, myrrh, and juniper berries. The smoke, he claims, cleanses the mouth and wards off decay. You watch as a woman breathes in deeply, then smiles. "May my breath please the gods." You step over to another merchant grinding malachite into powder, not for eyeshadow this time, but as part of a gum salve. The merchant mutters, "Green stone strengthens life. Green stone strengthens teeth." Is it medicine? Is it magic? Historians still debate. But the Egyptians saw no distinction. In their minds, health was a balance between body-spirit and the unseen forces of the universe. You notice bundles of strange herbs, some familiar like mint and sage, others less so. A man wraps one in linen and whispers, "Bury this under your doorway." It draws sickness out of the mouth and into the earth. Whether that's spiritual plumbing or just good compost management, unclear. Even the mighty carried protections. Amulets shaped like the Eye of Horus were sometimes inscribed with specific prayers for dental health. Some archaeologists have even found tiny charms shaped like molars buried with mummies. One papyrus reads, "If a man's teeth pain him, let him grind ochre with beer and honey place upon the tooth, and recite the words of cleansing 7 times. Practical maybe, magical definitely." And when all else failed, people turned to the gods. Statues of Sekhmet, the lion-headed goddess of healing and destruction, stood in temples. Worshippers would leave offerings, bread flowers, sometimes even teeth, hoping for relief. A mother guides her young daughter to a shrine. The girl touches the cold stone foot of a deity, then whispers, "Please, no more aching." It's a reminder that ancient medicine wasn't just a science. It was a conversation between human's nature and the divine. As the sun finally slips below the horizon, the last merchants pack away their charms and powders. But the scent of incense lingers, a reminder that long before toothbrushes and dentists, people fought toothaches with hope herbs and a little bit of magic. And now, it's time to leave the world of spells behind and step into the scholarly debate of today, because next you'll discover how historians still argue whether these ancient remedies actually worked, or sometimes made things worse. The stars now twinkle above the Nile, but your journey isn't over yet. In fact, it's about to take a leap forward into the minds of modern researchers, scholars, and historians who've spent decades poring over papyrus fragments, tomb inscriptions, and the worn teeth of mummies. And here's the kicker: historians still argue whether any of this actually worked. You stroll along the riverbank, imagining a group of scholars huddled together, some nodding approvingly, others shaking their heads in disbelief. One camp argues the Egyptians were ingenious. They figured out natural antibacterials like mint myrrh and natron. These remedies must have provided real relief. The other camp scoffs. Relief? Maybe. But let's not pretend chewing on burnt eggshells was anything more than primitive sandpaper. The truth, as always, is somewhere in between. You recall the powders, the mint, the frankincense, the iris root. Modern science confirms that some of these do have antimicrobial properties. Salt reduces swelling. Natron, a natural form of baking soda, helps neutralize acids. Frankincense fights bacteria. Not bad for a civilization without microscopes. But then there's the darker side. You remember the gritty pumice, the crushed bones, the vinegar mixed with burnt bread. These abrasives likely scrubbed away plaque and enamel. Over time, the cure may have damaged teeth nearly as much as the sand in their bread. You overhear an imaginary scholar mutter, "Yes, the toothpaste cleaned teeth, but it also polished them right down to the nerves." Even today, researchers debate whether the rampant tooth wear seen in Egyptian mummies was from food grit alone, or worsened by overzealous scrubbing with harsh powders. Another heated discussion: were the magical spells and amulets purely spiritual nonsense, or did they serve as effective placebo-reducing pain simply because the patient believed they worked? One archaeologist gestures at a tooth worn to the root and sighs. You can't chew bread made of stone and expect miracles. But another counters. Look how advanced their formulas were. Complex mixtures of salt herbs, resins. They weren't guessing. They were experimenting. And here's an ironic twist. Some of their practices have come full circle. Modern natural toothpaste brands boast ingredients like charcoal baking soda and mint, the same core components Egyptians used over 4,000 years ago. Perhaps the ancients were onto something after all. Yet the jury is still out. Historians still debate, did the iris root actually fight gum disease? Or was it just wishful thinking? Was chewing on frankincense about hygiene or simply ritual before prayer? Were whitening pastes made of vinegar and pumice an effective beauty trick or long-term dental sabotage? There's also discussion about class. Wealthier Egyptians could afford finer flour, better sieves, higher quality pastes. Did this mean better dental health? Some evidence suggests yes. Others argue that even Pharaoh's dentist couldn't save him from the grinding reality of stone-milled bread. And then there's the philosophical debate, what counts as medicine? If a remedy comforts someone even without scientific backing, does that make it real? Or does it have to physically cure a condition? A young Egyptian today, learning about these ancient remedies, might chuckle and say, well, at least they tried. You can't help but admire that. The effort, the creativity, the constant dance between trial, error, hope, and practicality. As the night breeze stirs the reeds along the Nile, one thing is certain. Whether it was magic medicine or somewhere in between, the Egyptians refused to surrender to toothaches quietly. They fought decay with every tool, herb, prayer powder, and paste that ingenuity could offer. And as the stars shimmer above you, sense the story isn't quite over yet. Because next, it's time to explore how these early experiments didn't just stay in Egypt, but how they traveled, influencing Greek, Roman, and even modern dental practices. Their legacy much bigger than you think. As the moonlight glimmers on the Nile, you begin to realize something profound. The story of ancient Egyptian toothpaste didn't end on these sandy shores. Like so many aspects of Egyptian science, medicine, and culture, it traveled by caravan, by boat, by word of mouth, far beyond the borders of this mighty civilization. You follow an imaginary silk-laden caravan moving north toward the Mediterranean, baskets filled not only with gold papyrus and incense, but also with knowledge. Because guess what? The Greeks were watching. The Romans were watching. And they borrowed more than just pyramid envy. They borrowed Egypt's obsession with oral care. You stroll through the agora of ancient Athens. A vendor sells little jars of powder salt, crushed mint, and pumice. Sound familiar? The Greeks expanded on the Egyptian formula, adding their own twists. Crushed oyster shells, ground marble, vinegar rinses. An elderly philosopher strokes his beard and mutters, "A clean mouth reflects a clean mind." Socratic wisdom or just trying to avoid garlic breath, historians still debate. Then the story sails west to Rome. You walk into a Roman bathhouse where men gossip, lounge, and scrub their teeth with pastes remarkably similar to Egypt's. But leave it to the Romans to take things up a notch. They add powdered charcoal, burnt antlers, and even urine. Yes, really. Ammonia-rich urine was prized as a bleaching agent. One Roman woman brags to her friend, "My teeth shine like ivory." Her friend snickers. At what cost, historians still argue whether the Egyptians directly taught the Greeks and Romans their dental recipes, or whether these ideas spread organically through trade and migration. But the parallels are undeniable. You pass a Roman apothecary. Jars labeled for whitening, for sore gums, for bad breath line the shelves. Swap the Latin for hieroglyphs, and this could be a street stall in Thebes. The legacy doesn't stop there. You trace the thread forward through medieval Europe, where tooth powders become a mixture of burnt rosemary, crushed seashells, and honey. In China, records show the use of salt-based scrubs similar to Egyptian natron recipes. And fast forward again to the 18th century. European pharmacies begin producing mass-market tooth powders made of chalk salt and peppermint oil. Sound familiar? Then, the 19th century brings the first collapsible toothpaste tubes. And inside, guess what's still there? Baking soda, mint oil, sometimes charcoal. The same core ingredients Egyptians ground together thousands of years before. Modern historians still debate how much credit Egypt deserves in the lineage of dental care. Was it truly the origin point, or just one of many brilliant nodes in a web of ancient discovery? But whether it's the blueprint or a major influence, their fingerprints, quite literally, are all over our dental history. You walk past a modern drugstore in your mind's eye. Toothpaste brands line the shelves. Whitening, sensitive charcoal. Clean, natural salt fresh. Swap the packaging for papyrus scrolls and clay jars. And you're back under the Egyptian sun. One ancient scribe's formula, written hurriedly in a marketplace, echoes quietly every time someone in the modern world brushes their teeth before bed. It's humbling, isn't it? The fight against bad breath tooth pain and stained molars, as ancient as civilization itself. As the wind stirs the reeds along the riverbank, you take a deep breath. The journey is almost complete. But there's one last thing to experience a walk through an ordinary day in the life of a tooth-conscious Egyptian. Because seeing the recipes is one thing, but living them, that's where the story truly comes to life. The first rays of morning light spill over the Nile, and you open your eyes inside a modest mud brick home. For just one day, you are no longer a traveler. You are an ordinary ancient Egyptian, and today you're going to live the life of someone who cares deeply, perhaps obsessively, about their teeth. You sit up on a woven reed mat. Beside you, a small clay jar, weights filled with yesterday's freshly mixed tooth powder salt, mint-dried iris, and a pinch of ground pumice. You dip your chewed twig brush into the powder, gently scrubbing your teeth while peering out the window at the waking city. A neighbor walks by and calls, "Don't forget to rinse." You smile, mouthful of minty grit. Morning banter, Egyptian style. Breakfast is bread dates and beer, the liquid bread that fills the belly without the danger of chewing too much sand. You crack off a piece of flatbread, feeling that familiar crunch of stray grit between your molars. You wince. Yep, still there. Halfway through your meal, you chew on a frankincense resin ball to freshen your breath. The sticky resin coats your mouth with a sharp, piney flavor part, mouthwash part, spiritual armor. By mid-morning, your youngest child tugs your hand. Mama says, "My tooth hurts." You nod knowingly. The family walks together toward the temple where the priest doubles as healer. He examines the child, presses fingers along swollen gums and murmurs, "Salt, iris root, and this." He hands over a tiny amulet carved with the Eye of Horus. Wear it always, the priest instructs, so the tooth demons do not return. A blend of treatment and ritual, medicine and magic. As normal as fetching water from the Nile. Later, you head to the marketplace. A perfumer sells small linen-wrapped breath fresheners, dried mint, and cinnamon tied with a silk string. For talking to the tax collector, the vendor jokes. He appreciates sweet words and sweeter breath. You buy two. Passing a bakery, you smell fresh bread. Tempting, dangerous. You remember yesterday's lecture from the temple healer. Chew slowly. Soak it in beer if needed. You buy the bread anyway. In the afternoon, heat, a neighbor shows off a new recipe for whitening teeth. Charcoal and vinegar, she boasts, whiter than a crocodile's smile. You try a bit. It tingles. Maybe it works. Maybe it's just a clever sales pitch. Children play with sticks by the river, chewing on one end until it frays, primitive toothbrushes in the making. You watch, remembering how your parents taught you the same. As evening approaches, a relative visits, complaining of a toothache. You help mix a poultice crushed barley honey and garlic. It smells aggressive. Whether it cures anything is anyone's guess, but it seems to help. Or at least distracts from the pain. Dinner is soft stewed lentils, more beer, slices of soft cheese. A practical choice for tired jaws. No one's taking chances with broken molars tonight. Before bed, the ritual begins again. Rinse with natron-infused water. Scrub with mint powder. Chew on a resin ball for luck. Whisper a quiet prayer to Thoth. Keep my mouth clean, my teeth strong, and my words pure. You lie down on the reed mat, staring at the thatched ceiling. Somewhere in the distance, a priest chants. Someone laughs. A donkey brays. And as your eyelids grow heavy, you realize, despite the thousands of years between their world and yours, some things are deeply universally human. The fight for comfort, the rituals of care, the tiny acts of daily dignity, like scrubbing your teeth before you sleep. Because whether you are an Egyptian in 1500 BC or someone listening to this in the modern world, the simple truth holds: we are all just trying to keep the sand out of our bread and the toothache out of our lives.